Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you find yourself on this, the seventh day of our devotions together this week. We're rounding it out on Sunday. At least we are, wherever you're finding us along the way. Welcome, we're glad that you're here. And we want to continue to connect with the heart of God, Yahweh. We see this revealed as a complaint poured out. Have you ever been around a child or an adult? And I'm not talking about the whiny, constantly complaining, never happy person. Let's take that person that you might have immediately thought of when I used the word complaint. There's probably a word picture that came to mind. But think about that person that confides in you, that person that comes aside when you ask them and press in, a dear friend that you say, really, what's going on? What's happening? And then they pour out their heart to you. You're going to hear about the disappointments, you're going to hear about the wounds, you're going to hear about the offenses, you're going to hear about their complaint. And you're also going to hear some very reasonable complaints, reasonable disappointments. And sharing that is cathartic itself. And then if that information can be filtered through a counselor or someone to the other party within that marriage or within that relationship of a family, then eyes can become opened and awareness can be elevated, and someone can be aware and saying, I really didn't intend to do that. I really didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry, apologies, things like that can happen. So a complaint can turn into the basis for reconciliation. When the righteous, completely wonderful and perfect God of the universe, creator of everything that exists, pours out his complaint to Hosea, who can completely identify with him because he has walked it out physically in his life by marrying this prostitute Gomer and seeing that two-thirds of his children are not his, whether he knows who the father or not, whether she knows who the father or not is, doesn't seem to be a settled issue. He simply knows that the first one is. And what a tremendous pool of hurt and pain and complaint and problem. So Hosea is living and feeling what God has been living and feeling in conjunction to the people of Israel, who are divided into northern and southern kingdom, and yet he has a covenant and commitment to them. And so out of the basis of that, we hear that complaint. And we look at Hosea chapter 7, 11 through 13. Ephraim is like a dove, easily deceived and senseless. Now Jesus asks us to be as harmless as a dove, but as wise as a serpent. Why? Because Jesus knows that even though a dove is a symbol of peace and non-aggression, it is also a symbol of silliness. It's also a symbol of not very intelligent. And so in order to clean up that symbol and kind of elevate it from where it naturally is on the earth, he doesn't ask us to be as harmless as doves only. He asks us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. How we deal with what we know and how we know it and how we understand and to what ends we use it now becomes important. Here, Ephraim, who is the prince of Israel, the descendant of Joseph, the great Joseph, has now been degraded to the point that they're easily deceived and senseless. This is what walking away from God does. This is what the anointing, when lifted, does. It leaves us to our own devices and it's not a pretty picture. Now calling to Egypt, now turning to Assyria. We had looked yesterday at how desperately they were looking around for help anywhere but from the Lord. And people get into that mode so easily. They look anywhere but to the Lord. And here they're calling to Egypt, now turning to Assyria. When they go, I will throw my net over them. So they can't simply walk into a vacuum and walk about as if there's nothing significant about themselves, that they're not in a covenant and a relationship, an unending covenant and an unterminated relationship with Yahweh, the creation, the King of creation, the creator of everything that exists. When they go, I will throw my net over them. I will pull them down like the birds in the sky. So we think in the terms of shotguns and dove hunting and things like that in Texas. This was the idea of casting a net over where a group of birds or a flock of birds was. Maybe they would put down seed or something, and the birds would eagerly swoop down and become focused on getting their food. And then they would fling a net over them, much like a net is cast into the sea and captures fish. And then they would capture live birds. They would capture live doves. And that's the picture here. I will pull them down like the birds in the sky, and they will be captured. It's not the idea of killed, it's the idea of captured or restrained, that there's a network or net which will restrain them. When I hear them flocking together, I will catch them. This is the key when you're hunting. You want the birds to flock together. You're not interested in picking them off one by one, but you're interested in capturing them live as a flock. When I hear them flocking together, I will catch them. Woe to them, because they have strayed from me. They as a group have strayed from me. So the birds of a feather flock together, and there has become an agreement not to seek the Lord, but an agreement to stray from the Lord and not only partake in idolatry, but instead of looking to the Lord for defense and safety, they're now looking to Egypt and Assyria. Excuse me, but weren't they delivered from Egypt hundreds of years before under the mighty hand of God? Why would they want to return and find confidence in Egypt? And weren't they settled in this land that was given to them? And now they're looking to a country to the north of Damascus, up north, and taking in modern day Syria, up into Iran and Iraq, up towards Nineveh. Nineveh, Jonah would go to Nineveh as a prophet. A terrible people, and they're looking to make a peace with them. And here's what God says: destruction to them, because they have rebelled against me. The only reason they're not destroyed is because the hand of the Lord is over them. His protection is over them, because He has picked them out from all of the nations of the earth. They are His and His alone, and the other nations are under fallen and unfallen angels. These particular nations seem to be under the sway of fallen angels and evil forces. And because they have rebelled against me, I long to redeem them. Now we have the heart. Very often when we have a complaint, it's hard to really share our heart. Notice how God is easily sharing His heart. He has nothing to hide. Not only does He reveal the offense of the people that they have committed, but He continues to reveal His chesed, His loving kindnesses, this great agape love in which He loves them with an everlasting love, with an unending love. I long to redeem them. Hosea had redeemed Gomer from the marketplace with 30 pieces of silver, essentially. It was actually a group of 20 shekels, and then a group of, I believe, some animal or some wheat or some grain. And when it was all pieced together, there was 30 pieces of silver, what you would pay for a slave. He says, I long to redeem them. I long to bring them back to me, at least to purchase them as they've put themselves in slavery, to at least purchase them and make them my slave, And then I can speak to them calmly, and I can treat them so much more different than everyone else does. And then they might see what it is to be loved by the God of heaven. He says, I long to redeem them, but they speak about me falsely. They speak about me falsely. They accuse God of being and doing and acting in a way that has nothing to do with his nature. They cling to their idols, but they charge God falsely. So here's our meditation for the day. How many times do we find ourselves wanting to blame God for things that are not his nature, not his character, and not the way that he does things? And what we're actually doing is laying a charge against the Lord falsely. How many times have we blamed God for things we have done, other people have done, things that the enemy of our soul has done, things that unclean spirits have done, the consequences that we've come into because we have made bad choices? We have thought about it little or not at all, that we've rushed in headlong and done something driven by only our emotions, something we wanted to do. And when it turns south, suddenly, God is the bad one because he hasn't taken our poorly planned ideas, our unbiblically held notions, and somehow baptized them in his love and grace and made them work out anyway. Am I the only one here? So on this day, on this Sunday, in your meditations, to let that trickle into your heart and continue to munch on that and look at that. Lord, how many times do I tend to want to blame you for something that is the enemy, that's my fault, or is another person's fault, or an unclean force's fault? Lord, bring me clarity. So think about that today. Where is it that I have a tendency to speak about him falsely? I'm betting that he will gently and clearly reveal that to you and bring a transformation in your life if you'll invite him and you'll allow him. Lord bless you. Have a great day. Hope to see you tomorrow.